Hello, hello. How is everybody doing today? How are you? And hey, we've got the evil, we've got BG, we've got Gwen Frey. How is everybody doing? And good morning. You are up late. BG, anybody in Europe, thank you so much for being here. Just like our wonderful, wonderful Sacha Rosel today. It's time zones. Have a happy time zone, everybody. Oh, yes, I will not forget to start the event on Discord. There we go. Let's start that. Thank you. There we go. I'm just not going to hit the allow everyone to know button. I need to get back here. There we go. And now I'm just going to make sure that I have the right. I'm a cheeky scamp. We've got a cheeky scamp today. So I am fairly certain I will have to rejig the Discord. That is okay. Just give me 1 second. Whoop. There we go. We are here. We are live. And thank you everybody for coming. Want to say a hearty thank you and welcome to Sacha Rosel, the author of My Heart is the Tempest, the book that is currently on your screen. In a land of oppression where light is stone cold blindness and snow and ice claw all form of resistance to pieces, darkness is waiting to arise, rage bubbling from the embers of the earth to meet its fire embrace. This is a fantastic work of dark fantasy. And just a wonderfully imaginative book. You know, I can't wait for everybody to read it. It's just such a fantastic, fun time. And today we have the author of My Heart is the Tempest. Sacha Rosel is an author of Italian origin. Sacha Rosel has a summa cum laude degree in foreign languages and literatures, majoring in English, and a master's degree in Oriental languages and civilizations, majoring in Chinese. Writing her final graduation thesis on restoration playwright and writer Aphra Behn and on 5 Chinese women writers from the modern era, 1927 through 1949. She has been writing for more than 20 years, mainly using her mother tongue, Italian. Previous projects include a horror fantastical novel inspired by Chinese culture and a lyrical dystopian novel combining mystical Taoism and post-structuralist feminist theories. She has worked as an English to Italian fiction translator for World of Warcraft: The War of the Ancients trilogy by Richard Knack and taught English for the last 15 years. The book that she is going to be reading from today, My Heart is the Tempest, was inspired by Shakespeare's The Tempest, and including direct citations from the play, My Heart is the Tempest is a dark reimagining of the witch Sycorax, here portrayed as a 12-year-old olive-skinned, black-haired human girl trapped in a land of cruel, insect-like albino creatures who worship light and snow, loathing everything deviating from their personal truth, including her. Deemed to be a threat to their infallible world. After unconsciously awakening her grandmother Miranda to life, Sycorax slowly comes to realize that the land she's always yearned for actually existed in the past, before being erased from everybody's memory. Now, thanks to Miranda's help, Sycorax can make that land erupt again, but she will have to learn how to welcome darkness first. With an accessible but richly visual and lyrical style, My Heart is a Tempest is a dark tale of self-discovery focusing on an anti-heroine figure learning how to face a world of light made of terror and violence and embracing her hidden powers, thus becoming a conscious instrument of darkness. The novella is also meant to be the first of a dark fantasy trilogy, each volume representing a different stage of life from teenage years to adulthood and old age, focusing on the themes of rage, vengeance, forgiveness, and reconciliation. So glad to have you here with us today, Sacha. How is it going?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's going okay. It's 2 in the morning here, by the way.
Oh, you are a trooper. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, time zones. Time zones are fun, aren't they? Oh, goodness. But So before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be reading from in the book today? Obviously, if you
Uh,
want spoilers, read the book. Everybody, there will be links in descriptions and everywhere for you guys to, if you like. If you are on Kindle Unlimited, My Heart is the Tempest is there in the catalog. So if you do use Kindle Unlimited wherever you are in the world, that means, you're paying a subscription fee and you can read as many books as you like. Please download My Heart is the Tempest. It's no extra cost to you if you're using Kindle Unlimited already, and it very much helps Sacha in a lot of amazing ways. So, there we go. Oh,
yes, the excerpt I'm going to read today is from chapter 1, and it's focused on Sycorax in particular and on her reactions to what um, Nivelians do to her. And also, there's an interaction between her and Nivelians at some point. And we are at school. The setting is the school. Yes, so. Okay. Sycorax stood fuming but speechless, a hurricane of detonation ready to explode, but ultimately failing to. Once again, she remained silent before them, anger racing through her veins, unable to transform into any actual power. If only she could learn how to summon this power, the creatures of bright would vanish to dust. But she never managed to see beyond rage. When the alabaster children attacked her, she felt swallowed by a huge black hole, pulling her closer, dragging her deep underneath the soil, where she sensed real life was. A life without rocks, ice, no snow, though she didn't know how to find it. Despite knowing any reaction on her part would be an insult to the supposedly perfect world of Neville, she longed for that reaction to come and life to appear, finally releasing her from misery. She hated the fact everyone, her parents included, deemed Neville to be the only possible world. A frozen land of everlasting snow and high mountains as far as eyes could reach. Looking at the horizon, all she could see were the shining stones, the dark mountains shielding Neville from the outside, assuming a real outside existed. Nothing else was visible because of the never ending peaks and ice blocking the view, erasing it into pinnacles of white. How could that be the only kind of life throbbing in the heart of the world? How could they not see Neville was only a solid confinement of snow, a prison made of ice and rocks? If only she could find this mysterious power she longed for and make those rocks, ice, and snow yield, melting like water. If only she could tear everything down and see what was beyond that white terror. She would finally step into some unknown land of beauty, somewhere different, hidden far away from sight, in the dark tunnels of the invisible. She dreamed of that land as if it was some secret gem made of night, raw like rage, buried deep into the ground, but ready to spring back into the air and obliterate all snow and ice and eternal cold, crushing her breath and freezing her skin with harsh, malevolent words. Something only her heart could understand. Once that vision appeared before her eyes, she would finally know which words to say, which moves to make, Then she would whisper the sounds coming from her conversation with the unknown, and finally destroy those beats and those creatures constantly calling her names as if she was a monster, hissing their cruel words and insults to her face without rest. She would speak those words, their sounds pouring from her mouth and burning the world aflame, changing the color of things forever, until snow ice white turned into black and coral red, into something rich and strange. Only a few seconds passed. Casually wiping the creatures of bright's saliva off her face, Sycorax swiftly moved to the bottom of the classroom, without waiting for the teacher to shout his usual order to make room for the snow icy haired pupils. She was constantly reminded they were the only ones entitled to sit in the front rows, because they were the purest children of Nive, and she didn't want to hear those same words again. Rage swirling in crimson flames around her, she darted towards the rare seats. As usual, the other pupils averted their eyes, for fear the pure crystal might be infested with her dark stare. Maybe Lord Hirila, too, wouldn't pay much attention to her today. No one talked to her, unless Leo found it amusing to while away the time with torment, thus causing her to speak. Except for her parents, no other descendant of the Valley of Moss refugees had children. Naturally, a curse befell the intruders, barrenness deemed as the punishment for those who were not the original inhabitants of Neville, the right reward for their diversions from the creatures of Bright. Her parents were an extraordinary, albeit unfortunate, exception, as she was an unwanted singular eccentricity in a realm of absolute perfection. If the Council of the Bride was to decree her banished from lessons one day, no one would argue, but welcomed the decision with joy. What a touch of triumph would show on their sneering faces, finally seeing her slither back to the wild cave she originated from. If only she could find some quiet place to breathe without any of them tormenting her, she would be free to unravel her secret thoughts to herself, at least for a while. But she couldn't go anywhere else now. The bottom of the room would have to suffice. For a few moments, she could disappear in the small dark corner of her mind, where smoking fury lay waiting. There, she would happily dream of a brave new world in silence. What on earth do you think you are doing, you insolent noisemaker? Lord Hirila shrieked all of a sudden at Leo's request. Glyn and Nacklin exchanged glances filled with brazen amusement, and all the Suddens turned towards Sycorax, their white crystal pupils filled with cold disdain. Apparently, her meeting with Fury would have to wait. Noise, sir? She wasn't sure she said those words. Ripe on her lips, rage seemed to have sealed all sounds from her breath. She only hoped that moment would vanish quickly. Noise indeed, the teacher thundered on, his curly snow icy hair frantically shaking for the girl's unexpected reaction. The very way you tread the ground causes my head to bleed. Wouldn't you agree, my dear Cleo? By all means, the boy confirmed, eyeing her with disgust. How could she dare speak to them? We were all shocked at hearing the dark-haired girl's creaking steps thumping, Leo went on. It sounded as if a horde of blackbirds stamped on the floor. She probably did it on purpose to distress us all. Her toxic voice still pounding in his brain. He needed those words to chase her evil presence away. I did no such thing, you liar. Sycorax hadn't spoken this time, but then anger printed its mouthful of dark sounds on her lips. Would you prefer I stayed in the front rows, sir? Of course not, Lord Hirila roared, the snowflakes' patterns on his wings animated with impatience. Your dark presence would bar our labor. Would he need to call upon the Council of the Bride to make her stop? And where would you suggest this dark presence of mine to find a place most agreeable for you to sit in, sir? This last sentence she retorted at once, words bubbling out like mercury. It probably was a mistake, but she couldn't help it. She had to let at least one drop of rage fall on their stupid tyranny of perfection. What strange curse are you muttering under your savage breath? Lord Hirilas suspiciously inquired, his glittering wings and prominent creamy eyebrows shaking in alarm, for fear her voice would speak again. Leo, if you please, command her to silence. My head is troubled. With pleasure, sir, Leo answered, his eyes brimming with joy, for the teacher sanctioned his rightful thirst for revenge. Sensing the twins' eyes galvanizing him into action, he clenched his hand tight into a powerful fist. Eyes solid on his breath, snow valiant in his bones, he drew nearer, and without looking on the filthy olive-skinned face, he punched her once, twice, endless times. The sight of blood blurring his eyes, the room momentarily clouded in his own uncertainty, soon cleared with the freezing air of the morning. Blow your wind till you burst, you foul sicko. Shaking in frenzy, the front lock of Cleo's hair broke loose on his eyes. It was nothing but a fleeting shadow, a speck of haziness chipping his brain. Then he finally regained his composure. May never sing her evil will, Lord Hirila said, dismissing the whole matter with a disdainful sigh. Then he waited for Cleo to end the annoying ordeal before resuming his lesson. The toxic outsider was tamed at last. All was well in Nivelle once again. The rest of the school day passed quietly. Soon it was time to leave the Temple of Bright Eyes and go home. Sycorax lingered for a few hours in the main hall to let the pain subside. The dried blood felt sour on her face as the ice-cold air of the afternoon whipped on her body cheeks. Though empty, the courtyard still seemed swollen with life, despite everyone else disappeared. With her head tucked under the hood of the woolen cloak, she might have looked like a tainted ghost, a dark stain in the pristine clarity of snow, should any creature of bright stand nearby. Yet she was alone at last. No one would torment her, certainly not the occasional valley of lost servants she may come across along the frozen bridge and on her way out of the frozen gate. Besieged, as usual, by the cold brink of the perpetual lake, Sycorax moved forward, past every cornerstone of their eternal prison, until isolation cloaked her steps out of mindful mirror to finally meet the Time Tower and disappear into the twilight of the frozen forest. She removed the hood from her head. No grand palaces nor temples were visible there, no stirrings celebrating the endless power of light. Only the bare landscape, unprotected before her gaze, and deafening silence everywhere. Her view of things was unusually vivid. She couldn't tell why. Despite her eyes and lips still covered in frosty anger, everything looked more intense. The icy trees with their cloud-shaped tops and spectre-like barks pinned on the immaculate snow like skeleton gods, and the shining stones looming far beyond. Nothing could surprise her but beholding that stupid Nivelian landscape. It always looked exactly the same, and yet it always ended up being her only companion, the sole witness to utter solitude. She might dream of 1,000 distortions cutting through the monotony of eyes, tiny cracks entering the emptiness of white to shatter its eternity from within. That dream could never come true. How come her heart started pounding so noisily then, as soon as she approached the trees? Could her dreams become solid for once, and stand against the icy pops of snow? A sudden urge to run propelled her forward, as if some strange force was summoning her to new life. Could that afternoon put an end to all her misery? She raced towards the empty expanse of white, as if to access another dimension, rushing madly into an endless celebration of cold. The shimmering shine of the mountains grew closer and closer, but still she hoped her soaring spirit would rise and dissolve the granite truth lies, erase the sound of evil children's voices growling at her brain and telling her she was evil. Grinding, loud screams, ululating with scorn, saying she would never evolve growing wings as they did, because her birth was a mistake. Inferior species like hers were doomed to die. The snow suddenly seemed to succumb to her desperate pace until her feet sunk deep into the softer ground underneath, and she fell, face diving in white. A snow piece melted in her mouth. It felt bitter and fluorescent blue, like the landscape became in those brief moments when dusk receded into nights, the moment she was so fond of. Tasting snow felt like little ones electrocuting her tongue, or maybe she was the one stabbing the core of snow while meeting its harsh bite. Why did night always have to last 1 hour, and 1 hour only? Why couldn't she gallop her way into its velvet mystery whenever she pleased? Would it help her find her own personal path to metamorphosis, with no wings, no colorless cold, erasing all difference? Her face still covered in abrasive snow, Sycorax rolled on her back to meet the sky, finally exploding in glaring darkness. What if her dreams could become real? The end of day echoing in her aching bones, soothing her with a slow, husky, night-like voice. What if these dreams could rise, red as lava and blue as water, streaking the stubborn rock of the mountains with phosphorescent glows of salty air? She could almost sense this magmatic river inside, gleaming through her eyes, transcending the reality made of ice and snow, and shaping it anew. Soon it would all be lost in the pompous light of day. Soon, all that splendor of night, where white momentarily stopped its mighty rain and black glimmered in cobalt tears, would be gone. Like all intermittent showers of darkness briefly falling on her skin, before the inevitable paleness of day resumed its arrogant march. Her dreams would eventually evaporate into nothingness. Her river would not surface to life, not yet, but she would find it again.
Wow. I love the way that you build upon this sort of quite alien location, this alien place of absolute frost, of absolute just brightness to the point of blindness and orthodoxy. That sort of it this is a very good portion of the book to get started on, obviously, because it is the first. It is part of the first chapter of the book, and the way that this inciting culture is handled throughout the rest of My Heart is the Tempest, just, oh, I love it. I love it so much. So everybody, who has any questions that you want to ask Sacha about anything to do with writing My Heart is the Tempest, anything like that? If you have a question, please let us know. Hit us up in the comments. If you are in the Discord server, you can join, but we'd ask that you please stay muted for the most part when the Magdalene Feast is on. We are going to be figuring out a way to make this really nice and streamlined, so we can get lots of pretty visuals. All right. So we're going to take a short break of 1 minute, and then we are going to come back and answer questions. So please put some questions down there in the stream chat, and we will be going from there into a wonderful discussion about women in literature, which of course is one of my favorite topics. So, huzzah. All right. See you guys in 1 minute. And we're back. There we go. We are back. Hello, everybody. How is it going now? Okay, so we do have one question, and it's the question. This is something from that I got off of Twitter, that was being asked, and that was, does the author really, really hate winter?
Uh, Not necessarily. No.
They were like, do we need to send them some mittens? They get cold in winter. Just making sure there's
No,
enough.
of course, I prefer summer, but yeah, and autumn. But yeah, I don't mind winter. It depends on the kind of winter we are talking about.
An eternal winter where only 1 hour a night is actual
No,
nighttime. That's
no, no.
thank you.
I wouldn't like it. Uh, yeah, yeah, but I've never been to Finland where they have 6 months of uh, darkness, basically. I think it would be fascinating.
It's interesting, being going back to Norway to visit family up in Norway and things, and for Yuletide, for Christmas time. You get up, you kind of go about your day. Everybody has the sun lamps, at least where up high just by the Arctic Circle. Everybody has the sun lamps and things in their houses because you need some form of vitamin D. You need something. But when the sun rises at about 11:45 in the morning, and then it's completely pitch black again by 1:45, it I don't know, it makes me realize why youth was such a long holiday. Like, why everybody just sort of banded together and drank and told tales and had festive atmosphere and things like that, because you have to do something. Otherwise it's just so odd to kind of be in this perpetual place of night where you're not tired, but you feel like, should I be tired because it's dark out? It's an interesting thing. Like, it does do a little bit of something to the rain. And then BG says, we have like 1 month of summer and it still rains. Where they are up in northern Europe, up in the northern European areas. So I just want to say too, here is My Heart is a Tempest. And Vreda Literary, the publishing company of My Heart is a Tempest, will be doing a giveaway for My Heart is a Tempest on their Instagram. So Vreda Literary, I'll put the Instagram link up for everybody. But if you are on Instagram, you can get in on this giveaway that they are going to be doing in the next week. And that will get you a copy of My Heart is the Tempest. So all of that information will be via the Vreda Literary Instagram. If you are not on Instagram, but you're on Discord, you can still join the Discord server, the Macro Microcosm Discord server, and be part of the giveaway as well. So hit that link that I just put into the chat. That will take you to MMC, to Macro Microcosm, and you can be part of the giveaway either through Macro Microcosm, the Discord server, or through joining the Instagram. So that is something that is going to be happening, and it will be a big support for both Vreda Literary and for Sacha's release of the book. So, and for those of you waiting for your copies of certain books, I have been told that they're still dealing with wonderful things, and this has been affecting my books too. So it's been affecting all of our books because, Vreda Literary is the publisher of my fiction as well. There's just been such a big paper shortage in North America that it's been wonderful to to have electronic copies. All right. Let's see. And Gwen Frey says, the old saying about English climate, 9 months of winter followed by 3 months of bad weather. Yes. Wonderful times, wonderful times. So we are going to be moving our discussion on to, let me just change my window here just a second. There we go. So here is the Magdalene Feast website, and we are going to be having a little discussion today on the question, why are women who have access to the dark side of things considered as different, devious, and ultimately dangerous? Why does society need to erase their eccentricity? From Shakespeare to Clarice Lispector, from Anna Maria Ortese to Luca Guadagnino, our journey will explore the feminine as the ultimate symbol of monstrosity and otherness in all its empowering, though unpleasant and terrifying, magnitude. So we have an incredible individual here that is able to speak on this subject with such wit and intelligence that I'm just very glad to be able to have Sacha with us today. So, let's whoop, that was the wrong button. There we go. Back to your wonderful face there, Sacha. Why are women who have access to the dark side of things considered as different, devious, and ultimately dangerous? Let's.
Well, starting from the first source of inspiration from my work, which is The Tempest by Shakespeare. Um, in this late play, uh, the witch Sycorax is okay. First of all, she is erased uh, from the scene because what we know about her is just what Prospero tells us about her, and occasionally Caliban, who is uh, her son, also mentions her. So, first of all, um the very first thing we should bear in mind is that this character has been erased from uh, the discourse, basically, also because she's a woman, um, but also more importantly because she's a sorceress. Um, so she basically is seen by Prospero, who is the protagonist of the play, as the negative version of himself because he is a sorcerer himself. And so, what we come to know about her uh, directly comes from his own uh, assumptions about her because Prospero has never met Sycorax. What he knows comes basically from either her son, Caliban, who is also Prospero's slave, and from Ariel, who used to be Sycorax's slave. So, in a way, she needs to be erased from memory because she is the main antagonist of the protagonist, Prospero. And, but, so she is the black magic to his white magic. And she is also, in his words, she becomes the epitome of wickedness. So she's dark, she's malevolent, she's ugly, and she's a woman. And the fact that she is a woman uh, inevitably, in Prosper's mind, turns her into a malevolent and ugly being. Because back then, we are in the early 1600s when Shakespeare writes The Tempest. It is supposed to be his last play. Um, uh, the assumptions about women uh, are very negative ones. And the male culture Shakespeare is immersed in is completely anti feminine. And so she's also described as a woman characterized by a mitigable rage. Uh, and so representing the perverse, the irrational, the violent, and also the vindictive principle of nature. So, all negative elements that he tries to erase from his own personality, but he cannot because they are, in a way, very similar. So, Sycorax is the dark shadow uh, of Prospero in a way. So the assumptions about women at the time were that woman was corrupt, cunning and ambiguous, also because of her um, feminine characteristics of her female body. So basically, because of menstruation and because of the possibility of giving birth to children, her bodily fluids were considered to be corrupt and disgusting by man at the time and by male culture at the time. So um, she must be erased also for these reasons. And as critic Peter Stalybras says, um, witchcraft accusations, both in the late 1500s and in the early 1600s, were used to define the power of a woman as something unnatural in order to legitimate its opposite. So, in this case, prosperous magic, which is seen by himself and also should be seen by others as uh, a legitimate uh, natural form of power because it comes from a man. So, this is the reason why she must be erased. Because in accusing her of consorting with the devil and with Satan himself, um, it's also a way to reaffirm the order of things and the hegemony of patriarchy um, against, in this case, one single powerful woman who is or must be seen as a devious anomaly. Um, so I like this idea of uh, exploring this character taken from Shakespeare's from what we know about her in The Tempest and developing my own version of Sycorax, which is completely different, of course, but I will tap on this idea of a woman endowed with magic, so something extremely powerful as devious and as an anomaly, which must be suppressed by the natural order of things, which is what Neville is supposed to be, whereas Sycorax is supposed to be an anomaly, like we've heard before, and so she must be suppressed also because of that. Um, in my view, Sycorax um, sounds more like what Clarissa Pinkola Estes defines as la quien sabe, la loba, so the she-wolf, a sort of a different version of a Latina version of the Baba Yaga myth. So the feminine creative force hidden in every woman, not just in witches, but in every woman who needs to reconnect or wants to reconnect with her um, uh, powerful and in a way monstrous side, uh,
It's
so beautiful in her own monstrous way and the other
yeah.
way around.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you would mention the Baba Yaga, because in the Baba Yaga myths, I mean, there are very few stories when you grow up with a Slavic family, you know, or like my spouse with the Ukrainian family and different things like that, um, where they terrify small children more than Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga is seen as this very terrifying kind of woman, but the thing about Baba Yaga is that you can very easily inspire mercy from Baba Yaga. All you have to do is become useful to her. So one of the way that if you all of a sudden you get trapped in her in her chicken legged house and all this stuff, and she's gonna she's going to be that just evil and dark force. If you go into it and be like, may I, oh Baba, may I sweep your floors? Oh Baba, your fireplace needs to be well kept. Oh Baba, I can pick some flowers for you. Oh Baba. And the more things you do for her, thank you, Rund, the more things you do for her, the more you incite her mercy. And not only that, but if she finds that you are useful and she finds that you are genuine in that desire to be useful to her, she will then imbue upon you a magical gift. So there is that monstrous side of Baba Yaga, the murderer, the stalking and all this kind of thing. But then there's this other side of her too, where maybe if you just hang up the laundry and do the housework and alleviate all of these things from me, I will be at least a little generous. But even in that, you have to be careful of what you wish for. Um, so it's interesting when you kind of make that parallel because I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, I hear, okay, it's the different sides
Yeah,
even in the myths as they stand.
yeah. And of course, talking about witches, I immediately think about the Weir sisters in the Macbeth, um, which Shakespeare wrote earlier, uh, if compared to the Tempest, so in the late 1500s. And his main source for the Weir sisters was Holinshed. But while in Holinshed, the Weir sisters were women endowed with the gift of prophecy. So they basically were positive figures. Shakespeare turns them into dark figures. So uh, he turns them into forces of darkness. They are connected with disorder again, once again, like Sycorax. And so, disorder in nature, symbolized by thunder and lightning, and they reverse moral values because of what they say, the infamous fair is foul and foul is fair. So they are ambiguous creatures. They are described as midnight hags. And this ambiguity becomes their strength because, of course, it makes them uh, mobile if um compared to the strict social hierarchy Macbeth comes from and symbolizes at the same time, even if he's also an agent of disruption, but we're not talking about Macbeth himself right now. And another interesting thing about, and disturbing thing about witches as female figures in the Macbeth as well, is that they also symbolize self-consuming darkness and self-consuming evil, which was perceived back then as a typical feature of woman because in Latin, and Latin was used also by uh, witchcraft accusers and experts on witchcraft. Um, they took the word femina literally, so meaning femina, so minus faith. So woman was seen as somebody who couldn't hold faith in her body, within her body and her spirit, once again because of her physical features, which were corrupt because of menstruation and the things I mentioned earlier on. So these physical flaws, they were seen as physical flaws, corrupting her body as well as her spirit. So women in Shakespearean times are corrupt by definition. But the interesting thing about the Weir sisters is that they are exiles, self proclaimed exiles of the social order. They are not interested in the social order. They're not interested in the world Macbeth wants to be part of. So it seems their words trick him, but they might be interpreted in a different way, in a completely different way, because after all, they decided to exile themselves from the social order. They live in a shadow borderland in which uh, not simply social and cultural borders, but also physical borders and psychological borders are blurred and they are fluid. So, and also more significantly, their word is devoid of man. There is no military value, which is something that Macbeth uh, pays a lot of attention to and attaches great meaning to, but which they disdain. They're not really interested in these things. And they also uh, replace social hierarchy and all the linear history and themes connected to social reproduction with um, physical fluidity and also spiritual fluidity, so that in a way they're also gender fluid figures. So they are women, but at the same time they are non-binary figures because of these things, because they replace the fixed social cultural fabric of the time with fluidity. And they also represent the unconscious and the anarchic side of society. And they are creative and deconstructive forces. But their creativity and their sense of deconstruction is seen as chaos by the usual order of things and by people who represent or might represent the social order, like Duncan does before he's killed by Macbeth. And also, I agree with critic and scholar Terry Eagleton when they say that uh, the witches, the Weir sisters, are the true heroines of the play because they are also prophets or prophetesses, rather. They are poets and they are also devotees of a female cult. So they don't worship Satan or any other male demon or god. So they have their own worship of their own. They are also radical separatists in a way. And so they are extremely powerful and they testify to the multiple sides of reality. And I also took inspiration from them, and I will take inspiration from them in books 2 and 3, because I like this idea of deconstructing fixed identity and um, exploring or playing with a body which can be multiple and plural and thus finally free. So I will also explore this idea some more in book 2, especially in book 2 and also in book 3. Um, this mobility and this idea of a woman who is also a witch, who is basically creative and deconstructive as a force. And so she's seen as a threat and must be erased. So the witches, the Weir sisters in Macbeth, are only appreciated by Macbeth uh, in the very moment and only in the very moment in which he needs them. Otherwise, they are useless to him and they would be erased from the play, but significantly, they are not, as Sycorax will be later on in Shakespeare's um, career. So you have in this author, you have two different takes on witches, but they're all both of them are equally powerful in my own view, despite Sycorax is erased from the scene, but she's still obsessively, I would say, present in Prospero's mind. And the Weir sisters in Macbeth are um, a haunting presence, are a really important presence in the play. That is why Terry Eagleton defines them as the heroines of the play, because they are.
Yeah, and
And their fair is foul and foul is fair in the end is what really wins and makes the day at the end of the play.
yeah, and too with you know, I rewatched The Tempest, I rewatched The Tempest a few months ago, when I knew that this book was coming out, things like that. And the version of The Tempest that I had watched was the one where Helen Mirren was playing Prospero.
Yeah.
And even in there, there was quite a bit of misogyny that was still kind of bathed into the play just because of the way, oh yeah, because I'm a woman, they did all this. Well, that's not entirely true, but they still had that layer of erasure on Sycorax. That did not go away. But Sycorax was still so important in her absence. I do love that when you're reading a book from, a literary theory perspective, and you can tell how important a character was by the shadow that they leave when they're not present. We also have we've got a comment from Angstase, who was asking for a etymology check on femina in Latin, and was saying from Proto-Latin, doesn't it mean, the one nursing or breastfeeding, or the feminine mediopassive participle? But then she double-checked and said that the etymology was promulgated by Malleus Maleficarum as well, so that clears that up, yeah. And then we have Runed Writer. It's not Latin's fault. That's a 15th century lie. Yes. Yes. Oh, the Malleus Maleficarum.
Yeah, and by the way, James the First Stuart, who was king when Shakespeare wrote The Tempest, he was a great admirer of the Malleus Maleficarum, and he also was a self-proclaimed expert on witchcraft. So you have all these things embedded in the play somehow, also because of James and of his influence on Shakespeare's work in his later production, because of James becoming king. So in The Tempest, it's really strong.
Yeah, and
James's presence in the play is really strong. You can really feel it.
yeah. And I know that he must have been a fair amount through the King James translation of the Bible into the English language at that point, too, because James himself was a scholar and he was a translator. He was one of the people that actually tried to translate the King James Version. I say this in quotation marks, with the accuracy that they could have had at the day. You know, but that is set in quotation marks just because of all the different versions of varying accuracy that there were of translations into away from Latin and into the English language. So it's fascinating too when you think of King James not just as, a king, but as somebody who is really heavy into, this idea of witchcraft and witch hunting and kind of cleansing his society after Elizabeth is gone, but then also how he's influencing Shakespeare, but then how he is influencing basically the rest of the English language history. Two of the most substantial bodies of work that helped kind of formulate modern, what we would call early modern or modern English, are Shakespeare and the King James translation of the Bible. So you've got this equal push and pull from this central figure that is also kind of feeding into Shakespeare's work. It's utterly fascinating when you connect those dots and you're like, oh, okay, wow, this nothing is innocuous. Gosh.
Yeah.
We also have Ruined Writer says, it does remind me of a chat a few years back in class how Greek mythos there was a conjecture of the Olympian gods pushing towards a more masculine focus compared to Gaia, the spirits and the titans being close to Gaia, and a more feminine, in this context, implication being wild, dangerous, and harmful for society. We were actually having a discussion about this yesterday. I was doing a event with the Twitch Writers Network, and I'd read part of another piece of my work, and we were talking about myths afterwards, and we got onto the subject of Minerva Athena, and I argued that Minerva Athena was really, you can view her as the figure of internalized misogyny. Yes, she's a powerful female figure, but only as long as she's not reproductive, only as long as she's pushing away those things, she's keeping her virginity. Whenever somebody around her, like Medusa, in a lot of the myths, sometimes it's Amphitrite, but other times it's Medusa. It's Athena. Medusa loses her virginity, whether or not that was her choice depends on the retelling of the myth. And Athena punishes her for it and turns Medusa into the snake-haired Gorgon, and then incites a man to go and kill her. So
Yeah.
you cannot necessarily look at that figure of Athena or of figures of certain female deities in those pantheons without seeing internalized misogyny as part of their story. Because it's almost as if Athena was only allowed her power if she was not born of a woman but a man. So, she was born of her father's head. And two, if she was not presenting the reproductive side of womanhood, but instead, oh no, this valiant figure that's almost as wise, it's just as wise, wiser than a man, but in that wisdom is completely separate from anything that would potentially be seen as overtly feminine. I don't know if you have anything to. It's just something that actually happened yesterday.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, her femininity is completely erased, and she is a symbol of the social order, and thus of the patriarchal order, in a way. There's a book called, well, I read it in Italian, so I'm not sure about the original title in English. It's about the journey. So you have the journey of the hero, and there's the journey of the heroine. So that must be the title in English. And the author of the book actually mentions Athena, Minerva, as a champion of the patriarchal order. So she says many women should who are supposed to be powerful and who wish to reach empowerment, they should do away with Athena completely and try to find their own way, their own version of the heroine without depending on reproducing the social order the way it is. So, a way that erases women.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I was trying to find this book because I have it here, but I can't.
I know
Okay, here it is. Here it is. Maureen Marduk. Maureen Marduk, and it's called The Heroine's Journey. Okay, the original in English, it's called The Heroine's Journey. It's a fascinating book about myth and about the archetypal journey of a heroine instead of a hero. Uh, so she wrote it also for people who wish to write, because it is also for writers. It is meant for writers and script writers, but it also has a therapeutical purpose as a book,
So
and
Maureen,
it's really interesting.
I have it up on the
Murdoch.
screen here for everybody. Maureen Murdoch's the heroine's journey, woman's quest for wholeness. Now,
Yeah.
this is fascinating to me too, because there's another author that I particularly like to go into, Carol S. Pearson, who
Mm.
wrote years ago The Hero Within.
Mm.
And then Carol ended up, let me find it, Persephone Rising, or Persephone Rising. Hold on, let me open this up. There we go. Awakening the heroine within, and was sort of basically the companion of more of a feminist lens when you were looking at archetypal heroism. And so this one too, I was like, oh, I wonder if that was the book you were talking about, but nope. Yeah,
No,
it's
yeah,
I love
and
her
yeah, there
work, but
are many books. Fortunately, many books talking about these things.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
but yeah, yeah. But going back to ugliness and to the idea of a descent towards a descent into darkness, into madness. Uh, I would also like to talk about uh, my favorite book ever, which is called The Passion According to G.H.
So we
And
just
it
have
was written
one.
by Clarice Lispector.
We have one comment before this happens. Just a
Yes.
mild objection. Ace women, including sex averse ace women, are valid. A woman's choice not to engage with sexuality does not erase her womanhood. So when we're talking about ace as in asexual, asexuality is still part, we don't have to necessarily view womanhood from the lens of sexuality, but there can be more to womanhood than that. Just to making sure we're,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
I agree. No, I think that the Athena figure is far more complex than just somebody who erases her sexuality. I don't think that's the main point of her figure, but
I
okay.
think
We're not analyzing
yeah.
Athena here,
Yeah, like
so
I'll hit you up later, Anastasia, but I think my thing with Athena is more of how she views other women who make different choices and how she punishes women who make different
yeah.
choices. That's for me where Athena goes wrong as a figure. It's not the fact that she doesn't engage in sexuality, it's more about the fact that when other women do, she views herself as a righteous, punishing figure who needs to put this person down. So,
Yeah.
but yes, full disclosure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with
Moving
you.
on
I
to,
agree with you. That's the main point. Yeah.
yeah.
What she does to other female figures. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Moving on to The Passion According to GH.
Yes, okay. Before starting talking about analyzing a bit this book, okay, a little bit of warning. Uh, there will be, I mean, spoiler alert. I will definitely speak about the book because and all the, you might say, epiphanies and surprises and shocking events that happen in the book because the um, the plot itself may be summarized very shortly in just one or two sentences. And inevitably, if you summarize it, you reveal what happens, the shocking event that happens in the book. So, spoiler alert, I will tell you about this book and about what the main thing about the book is and how the story ends. So, but the beauty of this book is not about the story itself, the way I'll tell it to you, and I'm going to present it to you, but the way she uh, embeds so many layers to the story and the philosophical touch that she gives to the story. So, The Passion According to GH was written by Brazilian writer of Ukrainian origin and Jewish uh, ancestry, Clarice Lispector. Um, the protagonist is a woman, significantly given just two letters, so she's nameless, GH. Some critics, uh, Portuguese speaking critics, said that probably her name may stand for genere humano, which translates as humankind in English. And I tend to agree with this reading because, in a way, she represents everyone. But she's not every man, she's every woman in my own reading of the book. And I think also in Lispector's own reading of the book itself, because this is an extremely feminine reading of the story, and it's an intrinsically, inherently feminine story. So, what happens in the book is that the book itself is a philosophical monologue GH makes about what she experienced the day before and what Clarice herself defines as immense disencounter. So she has an immense disencounter with something. I'll tell you about later in a few minutes. And she tries to recollect what this immense disencounter caused her to understand about herself, her role in the world, and the world itself, and the meaning of life at large. So, GH is a rich woman living in an attic in a penthouse in Rio de Janeiro. At some point, because it is her housemate's day off, she decides to go to the housemate's chamber to clean it up. And while cleaning this room up, she finds an animal on the floor, blocking the way uh, to the rest of the room because there's GH, then this animal, and then the wardrobe. The animal is a cockroach. So, arguably, the most disgusting animal you might find in your house while cleaning up. And what this immense disencounter triggers in her is, you might say, a mystical experience and a mystical or transcendent materialistic view of her life, depending on how you interpret the book, because there have been many interpretations of the book. I have my own version, my own interpretation of the book, which I'll tell you in a few minutes. Anyway, this cockroach, um, okay, her first reaction to the cockroach is, okay, this is an ugly animal inside my home. I want to clean it up. I don't want this thing to stain my cleaning up. So she instantly pushes uh, the roach. And later on, she kills the roach because her instinctive reaction makes the roach die in the end. But what happens in between is that the roach gets wounded, and from the wound, there's an opening. And from the opening, a whitish substance comes out. And this whitish substance and the meeting with the roach itself makes GH wonder what this mysterious substance might be. And Lispector is very clear throughout the novel as to what the substance might represent. She mentions mother's milk, she mentions um, nourishment, maternal matter, as connected to this whitish substance. So something that might nurture GH and maybe reconnect her to her mother. Maybe it might have been Benjamin Moser, who is one of the biographers of Clarice Lispector, one of the latest ones, and more importantly, her biographer in the English language. He's also Jewish, and he um, what I find beautiful and interesting about his biography on Clarice Lispector, which I have here, by the way. Okay, here it is, a beautiful book, wonderful, marvelous book. Even if you don't know much about Clarice Lispector, this is a must for anyone who wants to know more about her. And he has, he traces back uh, Jewish motives and tropes inside her stories, her novels, and her writings, which nobody has ever done before. So it is a different take on her stories, different interpretation. And going back to GH and the passion, of course, the passion uh, makes us think about Christian religion because there is a clear connection between her experience and Christianity in a way. And at some point, she even says, Mother, blessed art thou among the roaches, now and in the hour of my death, cockroach and jewel. So, in a way, there is a Christian interpretation of the story, and also a Jewish one because the roach comes to represent uh, the hidden word of God or the hidden meaning of life. But I mean, my own interpretation of the story is that is more related to Taoism, meaning that uh, the cockroach, at some point, GH understands that in order to find herself, she has to uh, become the cockroach and dissolve her own humanity. And so at the same time, becoming a woman, a roach, a mother, the universe, uh, and something anonymous, meaningless, and life throbbing and reproducing itself in the way that pneuma and mucus, pneuma on the one hand as breath, and mucus as a yellowish substance on the other, reproduce themselves. So just life for life's sake, life nurturing life, like Zhuangzi used to say. Um, so uh, the ugly and the feminine in this novel are connected also to the idea of descending into raw matter, because this is also what the cockroach represents. Um, you have the wardrobe, and you have the floor, and you have GH, and in between there's the roach. And the roach is, in a way, a narrow passage. And in order to find herself and to, in a way, become one with the universe, GH needs to cross this threshold, which she does by eating the roach, because at some point in the story, she takes the white substance and she places it in her mouth. So it might be interpreted as Holy Communion if you are Catholic, I guess, but it might also be interpreted as, the hook Ding in Zhuangzi's story, uh, who, while cutting the ox and the meat of the ox, uh, becomes the ox itself, the knife cutting the ox, the act of cutting the ox, and the meat which is being cut, and the person cutting the ox, and all these things together connecting and resonating within the universe. So I think this is what happens in the story. And of course, it is also about ugliness, because, I mean, how could you possibly take a roach and put its white substance or even the entire roach in your mouth? It is something that disgusted even Clarice Lispector herself. At some point in one of her letters, she said, when I realized what GH would have to do in order to solve the situation in which she found herself, I was terrified. I didn't want to write this story. And she felt really uh, disturbed about the story she had created after creating it. But at the same time, I think that if you want to be and stay truthful to your characters and to your creation up to the very end, you can't really avoid this journey and this descent into madness, into darkness, into raw matter, into losing your own individuality, but paradoxically finding your own meaning and your own individuality, also dissolving into the universe and its elements. And another interesting thing that she says at some point is that the roach makes her understand that uh, what is hidden beyond what we see is a matter which is the indifferent explosion of itself. So existence, which is just concerned with its own existence and with its own process, with what she uh, calls, okay, she says, I is merely one of the word's instantaneous spasms. And I think that if you interpret that from a Taoist perspective, you can easily find harmony in this journey, which might be seen as an ugly thing on one hand, but it might also be seen as something connecting you to everything, connecting you to your own inhuman humanity in a way, and also connecting you to matter and life in its own, let's say, indifference to humans, because uh, life's aim is life itself. So again, Zhuangzi, uh, nurturing life is what really matters. So if meeting the cockroach and eating it means nurturing life, then go ahead and do it. And that's what femininity is all about in this book, I think.
It is a if you've never read it, if you are all right with that sort of psychological horror, I'd say go for it because it really does dive so deeply into a just a beautifully cathartic kind of not terror, but that slow dawning, and just it could teach a lot of people about how to string tension in and up and through. It's a fascinating read, and I'm not entirely certain if it's still actively in print or if it's on the public domain. Um, yeah, I believe that's the copy that I was seeing with the cover art that I was seeing on that one. I'm not sure if it's still actively in print. It probably is. The copyright may or may not have kind of. I'd have to check in just to see.
Well, there's one of
If it's
her
still.
sons who is still alive. Well, the
Okay.
other should be as well, but he suffers from mental illness.
Mm.
Pedro, and the other one is called Paulo, I think. And one of them is actually responsible for the rights of
Okay.
his mother. So here's to Clarice Lispector. Usually there's this reading on her books in English.
Beautiful. And welcome to Tellin Artho with your raid. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Hello, Uncle Ben. Hello, Tellin Artho. I am Sapha Burnell. This is Sacha Rosel, author of this wonderful dark fantasy, My Heart is the Tempest. And we are talking Clarice Lispector. We've also talked Sycorax and a wonderful amount of. And thank you so much for the follow. The kids are asleep. Oh, if the kids are asleep, we better keep whispering. And hi, Pickle Gangsta. No worries, no worries. If any of you have a question about writing, about fiction, about women in fiction, anything like that, please do ask Sacha. We are here during the Magdalene Feast reading series for that purpose to highlight the feminine and the strange. So this is a once a month reading series that we do here live on Twitch and on YouTube. And that is meant to just kind of expand people's views on the authors that are out there writing some incredibly creative work. So thank you, Pickle Gangsta, for all of the wonderful emotes, and Cucumber Gangsta too. And Talon Arthur says, didn't mean to interrupt. Please ignore me. Oh, you are all good. You are very welcome. Please come forward with any questions. If you go back on the VOD later, you can see that Sacha did a live reading from My Heart is the Tempest. And I'm sure you will fall in love, especially if you like fantasy literature with an incredible amount of emotional depth. All right. Back to you, Sacha.
Yes. So just a quick thing to end my speech on Clarice Lispector's book. Okay, what's the connection with my book or with my trilogy? Anyway, this idea of the descent, I will explore the idea of the descent into madness and into darkness a little bit further in book, especially in book two. But there's also a hint of that in book one, because of course, if you need to find your own way uh, as a dark figure in a land of white light and snow, inevitably this will mean for you to descend into something. So yeah, I will definitely explore that. So I will move on to another favorite of mine, who is an Italian author, virtually unknown, I think, in the Anglo-Saxon world, even if this book was translated. It is out of print now, but it was indeed translated at some point. So the author's name is Anna Maria Ortese, and the book is called L'Iguana in Italian and the Iguana in English. So the title is almost the same there. Anna Maria Ortese focused on the relationship between humans and animals in most of her books. And for her, animals were symbols of the union with the universe and a cosmic force. And they could help humans reach a better understanding of their own humanity and also of compassion in particular. This book, The Iguana, is unlike other books she wrote, which I also love, is focused on a female figure, Estrellita, who is half a woman and half an amphibian creature. Um, she, like all the other characters in the story, live in an imaginary island in the Mediterranean Sea called Ocaña. Some Italian critics argue that this island might be the same island that Shakespeare created in The Tempest, but you know, that's their guess. I mean, it might be, who knows, because there are many fantastical elements to the story. Um, so Estrellita, at present, when we meet her, is a maid and a servant, more a servant than a maid, because she is discriminated against by everybody. And she's made to the most powerful family of the island. But at some point, we come to know that she used to be the lover of uh, the leading lord of the island. So, an extremely powerful figure in the island. But then she was shunned because she is not entirely human, and everybody uh, disdains her and finds her disgusting because of her green skin. She looks like a sort of a lizard, and yet she's also very sweet and quiet. And she is a little bit of a siren and also a little bit of a sea monster. And she's a creature in between because she, while she serves uh, the people, the señores y señoritas, because it is set in a sort of a Spanish slash Portuguese island. Uh, so she serves them on land. But at the same time, she finds shelter in a well, so in a humid and wet space, because she's an amphibian creature. So she longs for water. Um, she is described as uh, a half creature who is not endowed with a deep understanding of other people and of herself. She's not very intelligent, but at the same time, she's very compassionate, and she would long to be fully human and also to have access to cosmic harmony. But these things have been denied to her also because of her double nature, half this and half that. So nobody really understands. And at some point, a man from Milan comes along, Tato, and they fall in love with each other. And but this love is a very strange thing. And of course, being a book by Anna Maria Ortese, who was deeply uh, convinced that humans were sufferers and they were bound to be suffering for the rest of their lives, not because they were damned or they were somehow flawed creatures, but because um, basically the evils of the world and the silent, what she defines in the book as the silent horrors of the world, um, shuts the very meaning humanity is supposed to be endowed with from their own lives. And so these bars the access to cosmic harmony to them. So Esrayita, in a way, embodies all these elements because she would like to access all these things because she has some part of divinity inside of her. But at the same time, she is monstrous, and her monstrosity is seen as a very negative, disturbing, mean thing by the people on the island. So, more than monstrous, I'd say Esrayita is described as mean and petty. She thinks about money, she thinks about clothes. So, on the one hand, she's seen as a very pitiful creature, so deserving other people's pity. But at the same time, she's seen as stupid and ultimately impossible to understand. Also, because she's a woman, but mostly because she's a woman in between. So she's also amphibian as a woman. So um, she might be the clue to a better understanding of the world. But this better understanding is impossible for everyone on the island, including herself. So I liked, and there are many feminist scholars, at least in Italy, or people who read Italian and who are interested in Italian literature, who read this female figure of Estrelita of the iguana as a disturbing female force who is beyond our understanding because, well, let's face it, because all the other main characters in the story are male characters. So there's a clear distinction between uh, what the majority of society thinks, society with society meaning man, and what an isolated woman who is perceived as different and somehow is indeed different might perceive within herself and surrounding herself. So I like this idea of a woman who needs to explore her beyond human, more than human, and possibly monstrous side to finally be free, even if in the novel we don't really know whether Estrellita finds her own psychological freedom or not, because the story is also about sadness. So my guess is that she probably won't, but we really don't know. And the hope is that at the end of the journey, probably the woman will find herself and her own freedom also, and importantly, embracing her own monstrosity, which might also be compassion, paradoxically.
Yeah, it's that. I know I have not. This is one that I did not get the chance to read in time for this. So I have yet to read the Iguana. I see that it is still available, and I've put the link to thestorygraph.com for anybody who may want to read the Iguana. I will also put the link on storygraph.com to My Heart is the Tempest. And here we go. I'm slowly making it work. I also, for those of you who came in the middle, I have put up the little blurb about Sacha. Sacha Rosel has been writing for more than 20 years, mainly using her mother tongue of Italian. Previous projects include a horror fantastical novel inspired by Chinese culture and a lyrical dystopian novel combining mystical Taoism and post-structuralist feminist theories. She worked as an English to Italian fiction translator for the Warcraft, the World of Warcraft, the War of the Ancients trilogy by Richard Knack. So, a major powerhouse in Italian fiction. And My Heart is the Tempest, this guy right here, is her first English language book that just came out. And here it is on the Storygraph. And so, the Storygraph.com is basically an alternative to Goodreads. Goodreads is good too. There's reviews on Goodreads as well as Storygraph. And I just really like being able to put the Storygraph has a really nice, very few ads, if not any ads at all. So it looks better on stream. All right, now.
Yeah, now,
Go for it.
yeah, I mean, last but not least, I would like to talk about a film as our last exploring of the monstrous and the feminine. So the film is called Suspiria, but it's not the original version of the film by Dario Argento made in the 70s. It's a remake or a retake of the story because it is completely different from the original version. And it was made in 2018 by another Italian writer, Luca Guadagnino. Okay, the story is completely different. And here again, as for Clarice Lispector's book, spoiler alert, I will tell you everything about the ending of the film. So I'm sorry, but I have to analyze the ending in order to speak about the monstrous and the feminine, the way it connects to my story. Um, so Susie Bannion is the protagonist of the film Suspiria 2018 version. Um, and she's not just the final girl of your typical horror film. She's something completely different. And the film really blew my mind. And I really took strong inspiration from this character and from the ending in particular for my secret acts and from what her journey will be and already is at the end of volume one. But there more will come in the other volumes uh, in order for you to understand the connection. So Susie Bannion in the film is a woman who basically embraces her own witchcraft. So she deliberately decides to embrace witchcraft and become a witch, destroying everything and everyone who stands in her way. Um, but significantly giving the other witches the choice uh, to do what they want with their life. There's this extremely powerful sequence near the end of the film. So the spoiler, this is where the spoiler comes. Um, there's the ritual of the witches, the ritual through which they open the gates to the Mater Suspiriorum, um, which is what the title of the film is inspired by. Suspiria, which means whispers. So Suspiriorum, the mother of whispers. Mater Suspiriorum, that's the meaning. And so she is the mother of all witches. And so Susie makes the other witches decide whether they want to dance or to die. So she finds her own power, and at the same time, she gives others the choice to do what they want with this power. And some of them choose to die because this power is extremely dangerous, even to yourself. So, in her choice, Susan is simultaneously made and unmade. And this idea of the unmade, which is also encapsulated in a song from the soundtrack by Tom York, the song is called Unmade, um, is important. And I was really fascinated by this. Some may find it disgusting, but I'll say it anyway, because it is part of the film and is extremely powerful. So, in order for her to fully embrace her own powers as a witch, Susie basically becomes a feast of maggots. So she becomes rot and putrescence growing from within. We don't see much of this in the film, in the sequence, because I guess it would have been utterly disgusting and too much to bear for the viewers.
It also could have
And
been effects costs, things like that as well. So,
yes, yes, but I think that the ritual sequence in the film is already as terrifying as it can get, as it is. Um, so she is unmade, so she becomes putrescence basically. And at the same time, she is made because in her mutation, she can find her truest nature, which is invincible and all powerful, and so not human, eternal. But being eternal for which, of course, means becoming literally rotten. So she rots and she proliferates and thrives through this rot. So, what the film says is you don't necessarily need to choose humanity to win or to embrace your own powers. What if you chose putrescence instead of humanity and instead of compassion in order to thrive and prosper and proliferate and propagate into the universe? This I find really revolutionary, extraordinary, and really extremely empowering, and in its unusual take on witches. Because also another important thing about the film is that Guadagnino makes the witches of the film, and so Susie as well, very similar to the weird sisters of the Macbeth, because they worship a female cult. The Mater Suspiriorum is a woman. They don't worship Satan, nor any god, nor any um, demon whatsoever. And at some point of the film, they explicitly say that witches are older than any god or Satan or demon ever existing on the planet. Um, and also, there is no male gaze involved during the ritual, because even if we have the witness, Dr. Joseph Klemper, he's just a witness and he's neutralized. So the male gaze is neutralized during the sequence, and it is an all female cult and an all female, uh, we might say, ending of the film. And the male gaze is also neutralized by the energy of one witch circulating on the other witches. So the energy circulating from one to the other. So I think that this is a truly terrifying and powerful conjuring of the primeval female force, unhindered by man, uncontrollable and fierce, ruled by no one by herself, but also undeterred by human uh, feelings, which might be remorse, love, regret, doubt, compassion, which is something my Sycorax shares as a trait with these witches depicted by Guadagnino in his film. So I think that somehow, if you are a woman and you are a witch, you at some point you really uh, want to embrace your power. You This means you have to leave all the rest behind, including feelings and including what we as humans might perceive as something positive, which for the woman witch might not be seen as positive because they might be seen just as a form of hindrance to her gaining her own power and her own freedom. So I think that this film also conveys the idea of a witch as an uncompromised, unsentimental figure who, if she chooses to embrace her own powers, uh, she might accidentally, we might say, um, forget about everything and everyone else because they don't really matter anymore.
Now, we do have a question from The Kids Are Asleep. Question. And now we did touch a little bit more on Shakespeare earlier on, so it's definitely something that I'll try and highlight again for the Twitch viewers. Are there other Shakespearean or mythological witches whose stories you want to tell or retell? So you specifically.
Yes, but not necessarily coming from Shakespeare, but I don't know if I can talk about them right now because they are part of the entire trilogy project. But yeah, probably I will. Yeah, I will definitely explore some other myths. So I mentioned Baba Yaga at the beginning. I will definitely um, explore this myth as well as the myth of, you might call her Persephone, but in other cultures, she's called in a different way. So I will also explore this myth probably, and also other elements to the story. Other works by Shakespeare also uh, will become part of the fabric of what I'm going to write in a way. So not just the Tempest, but also other works, and also parallel works or works by authors of the same period or slightly the same period. So the Jacobean period or even the Renaissance period, Christopher Marlowe and Thomas Webster, and yeah, many things will come, and of course also elements from Chinese mythology as well.
A lot to look forward to when you're reading Sacha's work. And again, I'm just going to put this on the screen for everybody to see. Where did it go? My Heart is the Tempest. Here's the Goodreads. So it is actually on Goodreads as well. But as you can see, Goodreads has lots of ads, so I don't usually use them when we're doing this. My Heart is the Tempest. This is book one. And I think that's one thing that I want to make sure that we have time for one last question before we close for the evening. I want to say, I'll say my special thanks and things like that in a minute. But I think when you're approaching My Heart is the Tempest, it is impossible to approach it as something that will purely stand alone. The entire story, the entire trilogy that surrounds it is, and I have not read book 2 and book 3 because they're not out yet. They're just book 1s. But just knowing how Sacha has been going about creating this work and creating Sycorax and creating this entire world, I find that this is an incredibly important piece of a larger puzzle. And I personally really like that when I dive into fantasy. I really like, even though this is a fairly, thin book, I really like the opportunity to be able to just kind of sit back and relax into this world for a long period of time. And of course, with something like My Heart is the Tempest, I don't know necessarily if relax is the perfect word, but be fascinated by. I think is a good one. So yes, it is book one of the trilogy, and each book of the trilogy have, uh, as you said, they have a different kind of focus with the emotions and just the kind of development of Sycorax and things like that. Um, if anybody has one more question, so I don't want to take up too much of Sacha's time. Uh, Sacha is in Europe, so this was a huge ask to get her to be here in the middle of the night in the early morning hours. So I want everybody, I hope you guys all, if you are on Instagram or Twitter, I'm going to put Sacha's links in the Twitch stream chat, or you guys can hit me up on Discord, and I'll also be putting up links to her book. So I want to say thank you for that. It's a very pretty book. It's also very excellent and. So the kids are asleep. Your question was answered in an incredibly in-depth entirety earlier on during this stream. So maybe hit me up on Twitch on a whisper, and I'll get you the actual timestamp for when that question was answered. The question is, what attracts you to writing about dangerous women with dark sides? And that was something that was discussed at wonderful length. So your question is incredibly valid, and we talked about it for almost an hour and a half. So I'll get you that timestamp. I'll make sure that I get that for you. Remind me though. Remind me. Now, our last question then becomes, what question do you wish people would think to ask, and what's the answer?
Oh, um, okay, so a question about the writing process, uh, probably. That's the question I'd like to answer to. So my writing process basically is it depends, but it tends to be very messy. So because okay, the way it works for me is that I already have the entire work hidden somewhere, uh, usually in my guts, somewhere in between my guts and my stomach or my lungs and liver. And what I need to do is to excavate piece by piece and block by block. And it, it can be really difficult and excruciating sometimes because, of course, there are several characters to care about and to listen to. So at times they wish to speak all at once, simultaneously. So you can't let them do that. So you need to, I need to uh, find a strategy, which is usually okay. I usually start writing in a, let's say, chronological order from chapter one until not the very ending, because in order to arrive to the ending, you need to really build up on the ending and on the climax. So at some point, I just stop because I no longer know what the characters want. And so I stop writing chapter by chapter and I start writing character by character. So I focus on one character at the time and maybe go back to the other characters later. But it also depends on the book. So, book one, My Heart is the Tempest, was, uh, I'd say, fairly simple to write if compared to other things I've written before that. Uh, I didn't have to do the excavating part, nor the character by character part of the process. I just wrote the entire book basically. And then what I did was revising and rewriting second draft, third draft, fourth draft, and so on. And I also added some nuances to some characters um, because they needed to be delved into a little bit more. But what I usually do, and what I'm also doing for book two, is what I described earlier on. So, this rolling in the mud thing, in which I kind of try to follow my characters one by one and see where they're headed. And sometimes it can be very difficult because I also have, apart from their voices in my head, pushing to uh, not be born because they're already there, but pushing to be heard and to be visible on the page. I also have all the voices of the things I'm working on, I'm researching on in my head. So I do lots of research for each book. Mhm. I read many things and I take lots of notes. So sometimes it they get in the way of my own writing. So of course I have to find a balance between what my characters want, the building of the world around them, and these sources, which might be useful, but at some point I have to let them go because they might be detrimental to what I'm writing because I have to find my own voice. So they're just there as a reference point. They can't be really that obsessively present in what I write. And I find writing extremely energizing, even if it is really exhausting at some point. And at times, I'm I tend to think that writing is the best part of my life and the best part of the day. And it's also a sort of a shamanic session for me. And I also think is an exercise in uh, disappearance, self disappearance, because you kind of step into your characters and you no longer exist in a way, uh, which is which I find extremely liberating because you no longer think about yourself only, and you become devoid of selfishness and devoid of your own pity, petty preoccupations, and worries of everyday life. You become something else. So, simply put, you become a vessel for something greater, connecting with the universe. And so you kind of become an antenna, captivating and capturing the energy of the universe and distilling it onto the page. And at the same time, I am a great fan of what became an obsessive, I might say, research for Stéphane Mallarmé, French poet, at the end of his career. One of my favorite uh, poems ever is a poem by Stéphane Mallarmé called uh, Un coup de dé jamais n'abolira le hasard, which translates roughly as a cast of dices will never erase uh, chaos and half-hazardousness. Um, and in this poem, Mallarmé made it very clear that writing also is a way to fight with the page in order for the white of the page to disappear and reveal what he called l'azur, the mystical, probably, or the azure, sky blue essence of the universe. You might interpret this in many different ways, I think. And to me, there's the hidden side of the universe, the epiphany, a promise of harmony, and also, in a way, the monstrous beauty I spoke about throughout this talk and this reading. with you. And thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you to everybody. We are going to wind down now and give Sacha the opportunity to go to bed.
Yes.
Ah, thank you so much, Sacha Rosel, for making sure that at 2 o'clock in the morning you were here and present to be with us, to read from your work, and also to discuss with us, you know, just the sheer amount of research that goes into creating an ethos and creating just the emotional movement which is in this book. My Heart is a Tempest, again, it has some of the most beautiful prose I've ever seen. And I know when I first got to look at the manuscript, it was just like, just the very first chapter. And if you guys want to hear that first chapter in two parts, one, we did a launch last week that you can see on Twitch and will also be on YouTube as well. So that you can actually view that recording. And so that will, I'll link that down below as well. And then earlier on during this wonderful Magdalene Feast reading series, Sacha again read from My Heart is the Tempest. That'll give you an incredible indication of style. If you like dark fantasy, if you like just kind of delving deep into this sense of, well, really, in My Heart is the Tempest, the darkness, getting away from that cold, unfeeling, merciless light, kind of bringing back that tempest, bringing back that storm. This is definitely for you. And I cannot wait to see what everybody thinks of My Heart is the Tempest. Another reminder to everybody, we are here for the Magdalene Feast. This is a reading series dedicated to the feminine, the outsider, and the strange. We do the Magdalene Feast reading series the last Sunday of every month at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard or Daylight Time, depending on what time of year we're in. And it goes live on Twitch and YouTube. If you know of a published author that you want to hear on the Magdalene Feast, let me know. If you yourself are a published author, whether self-published, indie-published, or traditional, all-inclusive, please let me know if you want to be part of this wonderful exploration and admiration of the feminine and the strange. And thank you to vredamedia.ca for allowing us to connect with Sacha for this day and to be part of the launch in a wonderful way. Verida Media and Verida Literary is a Canadian small press that focuses on speculative fiction, so science fiction and fantasy. Full disclosure, I do some editing for them, so yeah. So this is also they are also the people that before I did any editing for them, they published my work. So we are in a wonderful sisterhood when it comes to authors that have been published by the same company. Just full disclosure on that in case you see the website and you're like, hey, yeah, absolutely. We've been around each other for a while. Oh, and the kids are asleep says, thank you, exclamation mark. Angstaze says, balance is hard. And wow, thank you for sharing that. Yes. And another reminder, if you guys are on Instagram, follow either please follow Sacha. I put the link up in the chat, and you can also follow Vreda Literary, and there will be a giveaway going on to help kind of round out this launch period for Sacha's My Heart is the Tempest. But you have to be followed either on Instagram or be a member of the Macro Microcosm Discord server. So Macro Microcosm is the literary journal that Verida Literary puts out 4 times a year, and they have a very active Discord server discussing everything from Halo versus Mando all the way to incredible feats of philosophical discussion and science. So you are all welcome, and I want to say a huge thank you again to Sacha. This has just been an incredible time to spend with you and to kind of dive deeper into this heartfelt academia when it comes to feminine and feminist literature, and this basically shifting of erasure, which I think My Heart is the Tempest really does succeed in. It is basically a gigantic scream to reverse the eraser that Sycorax got in the Tempest. And I know it's going to continue as the next books come on, which, as you just told us about your writing process, you are deep into working in. And now for some final housekeeping goodbyes. So, my name has been Sapha Burnell, the author of 3 books and editor of many. I've got a couple more coming along the way, and I am here on Twitch 3 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays for the regularly scheduled reader response critique streams, and then also I will be switching to Fridays for the actual writing streams where you guys get to switch the narrative and critique me instead of me critiquing you. And I will be posting, all of the relevant links in my Discord server, the Beautiful Machines Discord server, so you can see it there. If you have Kindle Unlimited, My Heart is the Tempest is part of that catalog, so you can go and read My Heart is the Tempest in the next 5 minutes, downloading it onto your Kindle or the Kindle app if you already use Kindle Unlimited. And if you know anybody who uses Kindle Unlimited, please do share this love, share the information. Now, I think that about says it. What do you think there, Sasha? All right. We're both going to say hearty goodbye and hope that everybody has a fantastically creative day.
Thank you. Goodbye.